What's up guys, and welcome back. In this jam-packed big Switch 2 update video, we have a lot of new information to discuss and analyze, including Nintendo possibly confirming the Switch 2 GPU architecture. We know that the only one to really watch out for is Nintendo themselves and the info coming from them. And to go along with that info, but separately, we can also now nearly confirm which version of this GPU the Switch 2 will have due to another piece of new information that was just recently discovered. Also, later in the video, we will discuss why the Switch 2 should very likely be a decent amount more powerful than the Steam Deck, with proof based on leaks, and we even have a Switch 2 target demo versus the Steam Deck of Cyberpunk 2077 that will be showing along with the full version of the demo being posted on my second channel and linked in the description. And if you enjoy this type of content, please give the video a like and subscribe for more. Now, first up, and we'll just get this out of the way briefly, we'll go ahead and acknowledge a few of the new rumors going around about Switch 2. There is a rumor from PH Brazil, which was the same place that first reported Switch 2 is being pushed out of 2024 to an early 2025 release date, and now they are rumoring that Switch 2 could be revealed soon, likely very soon, possibly in just a few weeks from now, which might be the end of August or early September. And I'll leave the link in the description, but overall I'd keep your expectations in check about date rumors like this, and honestly I and many others who just have used a common sense time range have been saying to expect a Switch 2 trailer reveal in September or October based on Nintendo's own messaging about Switch 2. Now, I'm not saying anyone will for sure be right about that, but only that it makes the most sense and lines up with what Nintendo did with Switch 1. Now, next up, we have another rumor from FamiBoards, which is also not too exciting in my opinion, but it's kind of worth mentioning just the same. It was apparently discovered through shipping data in the back channels that Switch 2 might have a dock with a fan built in it, and that the system will have a 60-watt charger, which is about 21 watts more than the Switch 1 charger. And this of course seems to line up that the Switch 2 will be more power hungry and a more beefy device, especially when docked, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. It should be pointed out, however, that the Switch 1 also had third-party docks that came with a fan built in that you could also buy, so a dock with a fan in it isn't really something of a new idea, but if it comes standard with Switch 2, then that probably means Nintendo feels it's required, which also could indicate that Switch 2 is going to be injecting its SoC with quite a bit more juice and power when it's docked. So that's just a quick rundown of the latest rumors that are worth mentioning, but now on to the next piece of information we'll discuss, and that is Nintendo themselves, not coming from a rumor, but Nintendo themselves possibly confirming the GPU architecture for the Switch 2. PS5 and Xbox Series X and S are AMD platforms, and Nintendo was in fact using AMD last with the Wii U, and it wasn't until the Switch that they moved to Nvidia for the first time, and Nvidia gave them a great deal on the now famous Tegra X1 processor. Now of course, ever since the first rumors of a Switch Pro started happening in around 2019, the rumors have always stated it would be Nvidia powered whatever Nintendo uses next, which wouldn't really come as a surprise since it works so well with Switch 1, and also Nintendo's developers have had ample time to get used to working with Nvidia by the time the Switch Pro or Switch 2 came out. So for me, over the years, rumors of chips and the assumptions of certain chips being used for Switch 2 haven't really meant too much to me in the grand scheme of things, just because it's a really safe bet, right? The main chip that stands out for Switch 2 that is heavily rumored and discussed is the T239 chip back in 2021, which Nvidia didn't really use for any device, and various people have piggybacked that rumored chip for the last 3 years as to what's powering Switch 2. But the main issue that has creeped up in 2024 for that T239 chip was always its size, which was 8 nanometers back in 2021. And as time has moved on, it's proved to not be a useful sized chip for Nintendo for what they would need for a portable hybrid, which developers and sites like Digital Foundry agree on that something more along the lines of a 4 nanometer chip size from Samsung would be what Nintendo needs, at least for Switch 2, for clock speeds, heat, and power consumption. So due to questions like this, we are now in the realm of some unknowns about Nintendo's chip that they will use for Switch 2, since Nvidia has not been making chips for portable PCs like Steam Deck or the ROG Ally. Those have all been AMD based APUs for those devices, even though Nvidia just started a new production facility back in early 2024 for making new custom SoCs. Nvidia now does actually have the building blocks to really start pushing custom SoCs for portables, including for the Switch 2. So during all of this back and forth and uncertainty, that was why back in January of 2024 this year, I felt it was fair to list another possible chip that would give some similar performance to the T239 chip, just basically as a possibility to cover all my bases, since Nintendo has in fact been known to change up their specs and chipset during development of a console. They did this actually back with the Wii, which was heavily reported to be more powerful and leaning more towards an Xbox 360 at first, but then they decided to pursue the interface and controller over specs, and they did it again with the Wii U, which was also reported to be downclocked and even downgraded from what they originally showed in 2011, and even the Nintendo 3DS was originally Nvidia based, and it ended up not using anything Nvidia at all when it was finally released, and that's well documented. So with Nintendo, it's never been a lock, quote unquote, on how powerful or what type of chip they would use to power whatever next-gen device they reveal. That being said, however, I've always felt that it was much more likely for Nintendo to remain with Nvidia for Switch 2. It just makes sense. And now Nintendo themselves might have confirmed that Switch 2's GPU will be Nvidia based. And how do we know that? Well, Nintendo just a few weeks ago was hiring for a new contract position for a graphics engineer, and they said they need someone with experience with Nvidia Insight, which is a graphics debugging software that is only compatible, of course, with Nvidia graphics cards. They also listed that they want someone with RenderDoc experience, which also works with Nvidia GPUs, but for that is an open source debugging program. What AMD uses for debugging is Radeon GPU Profiler and AMD Perf Studio. So for Nintendo to hire a new contract graphics engineer right now in the middle of 2024, on the cusp of the reveal of Switch 2 for experience on Nvidia GPU graphics debugging software, this just might be the confirmation from Nintendo that we've been looking for, that Switch 2 will be in fact Nvidia based. And if it is, it's actually fantastic news, since Nvidia has some major advantages over Intel and AMD in terms of graphical features. AMD, even with Steam Deck, has been a generation behind Nvidia seemingly every new year they release a GPU, and the same applies currently. But that's not all. We also now have a pretty good idea what Nvidia GPU will be powering Switch 2. So with that in mind, it was just reported a few days ago that Nvidia will delay the release of their next-gen Blackwell GPUs by at least 3 months due to a design flaw, which basically will rule out any use of Blackwell for Switch 2. And of course, I realize that it might have seemed far-fetched for Nintendo to use Nvidia Blackwell for Switch 2 in the first place, but with all the rumors out there for Switch 2 specs, yes, I've even seen some claiming Nintendo could use Blackwell for Switch 2. So with this update, it would seem like Blackwell is off the table for sure and not be used in any way for Switch 2, which would leave Ampere and Lovelace for Switch 2 to be used. Now, Ampere would be the RTX 3000 series of Nvidia GPUs, and Lovelace would be the RTX 4000 series of GPUs. Now, some don't realize this, but Lovelace and Ampere are a lot more alike than you would think, with the main differences being Lovelace having 4th generation tensor cores, DLSS 3.0 with FrameGen, and being made on a 4nm process, whereas Ampere was originally made on an 8nm process back in 2020 on 3rd gen tensor cores, and still has all the access to DLSS, including ray reconstruction, just not FrameGen. Now for Nintendo, they could opt for a chip that has the size of Lovelace, basically 4nm or smaller, depending on what Samsung is doing with their custom chips they offer Nintendo, with those 3rd generation tensor cores, since that would be more than enough for Nintendo to use, and the smaller size of the chip to increase clock speeds greatly while docked for Switch 2. So at the very least, I think we've narrowed it down with real information, not rumors, to what Switch 2 could actually be using for its GPU. The Switch 2 likely would be a custom Nvidia Ampere based SoC with some Lovelace characteristics, and yes, this would be a nice upgrade from something like the Steam Deck, for example. The T239 chip that was leaked back in 2021 used 1536 CUDA cores, which is equal to 12 SMs, which stands for Streaming Multiprocessor, and each SM has 128 CUDA cores, and it's already been proven that Nvidia Ampere SMs have better performance in basically every way than AMD RDNA 2, which is what powers the Steam Deck. Now remember, the Steam Deck only is powered by an old Zen 2 CPU from 2019 and also only has 8 RDNA 2 CUs, which is compute units, versus the possible 12 SMs streaming multiprocessors of at least Ampere-based GPU power for the Switch 2. And I'll leave all the links in the description as usual, but Ampere SMs factually outperform RDNA 2 CUs in FP32 by a good margin. And what all of this means pretty much is that you'll be getting more power and performance with Nvidia per core than RDNA. And if you do the math, if Switch 2 has customized Ampere 12 SMs of power versus Steam Deck's 8 compute units of RDNA 2, it's not even going to be close. The Switch 2 will easily outperform the Steam Deck, and while docked with those potentially much higher clock speeds, that's where you could be getting performance more in line with an Xbox Series S and not a Steam Deck, at least visually. So I hope that makes sense, but if it doesn't make sense, it's sometimes best to just show you an example. So here's a Switch 2 target demo I made on my PC versus a Steam Deck on Cyberpunk 2077. The full video will be on my second channel, linked in the description, since it's over 10 minutes long. But basically what I'm showing is a test preview of what Switch 2 could look like running Cyberpunk 2077. Keep in mind, however, that this is just an estimate, but I am using the Steam Deck preset for the graphics setting for the Switch 2 demo, but with a couple of big differences. What some people don't realize about the Steam Deck preset is that the graphics are not really set that low per se. It's really a combination of medium, high, and low settings for an all-around decent look of the game. The main issue with the Steam Deck version of Cyberpunk 2077 is the frame rate and the very poor image quality, since you'll be limited to 800p using FSR 2.1 balance to get the game running over 30 frames per second. And I realize some have modified the game to use very, very low settings using FSR 2 quality mode, but overall the image quality at these low resolutions is the main reason why Cyberpunk 2077 on Steam Deck can look really bad up close. So for the Switch 2 demo here, as a baseline just to be safe, I've kept the Steam Deck preset intact, but instead of FSR 2.1, I'm using DLSS performance mode for 1440p, which is a 720p rendering resolution for docked mode, and for 1080p DLSS performance, which is 540p for handheld mode. And if you take a look, it is a huge difference. The image quality and stability of DLSS versus FSR 2.1 for this demo is not even close. This could really be the big difference changer for Switch 2 punching above its weight when it comes out. Since DLSS is a better image upscaler than FSR, the big differences are really noticeable the lower the resolution is, and I think that might be one of the reasons why Nintendo ultimately would want to stick with Nvidia, since Switch 2 will need to be dealing with resolutions under 1080p a lot of the time. Now, keep in mind, Nintendo also has been working on their own upscaler as well, so the cool thing that you can only really do with Nvidia chips is mix and match with other upscalers on its GPU. So FSR and DLSS can work on Nvidia GPUs, but AMD can't use DLSS. So for Nintendo, they could basically do the lower resolution pass with DLSS, say from 720p to 1200p or 1440p for example, and then use their own proprietary upscaler to then upscale the DLSS output to 4K docked. And this is actually becoming a common thing to do in gaming today, as sites like Digital Foundry have brought out. Games on console will use FSR 2 to upscale to 1440p from a lower rendering resolution, and then they could use TAA, for example, to then upscale to 4K on your TV. It doesn't look like true 4K, of course, but it does look better than their lower render-based resolution. Nintendo obviously has patented their own technique, and if it doesn't cost too much performance, then you could theoretically see games like Cyberpunk 2077 on Switch 2 be upscaled and output to 4K on your TV, with a much lower rendering resolution internally, but without the game looking blurry or distractingly low resolution due to DLSS and Nintendo's own tech. My guess is that Switch 2 will have a lot of games that look about as good as Xbox Series S in terms of image quality, or even better due to DLSS just flat out being far superior in lower resolutions than FSR is on Xbox or PlayStation 5, and that's just a fact. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to check out the full Cyberpunk 2077 Switch 2 target demo video in the description, and give my second channel a sub while you're at it if you can. Thank you all for the support, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.